Picture this for me. You have been wrongfully accused of a crime. The death penalty lays over your head. And yet, rather than being able to rely on our justice system to aid you, you must simply lie down and accept your fate. The reason why? You're African American. Good afternoon, teachers and students. To Kill a Mockingbird is a lesson to us all. After reading To Kill a Mockingbird, it has become clear to me that even though this book was written over 50 years ago, it still has many things to teach us today. The main topic that we talked about is how To Kill a Mockingbird presents the law and different issues in our Western legal system. You can still find the same issues throughout modern society today. By the time we're done, you will realize how much To Kill a Mockingbird can teach and how important it is for our modern society. Now, when I say To Kill a Mockingbird, you probably think, isn't that the book they force us to read? However, if you take a deeper dive into the book, you'll see how influential this can be to a young life. In the novel, the father to our narrator, Scout, is Atticus Finch. Atticus is a lawyer in the fictional town of Macomb, Alabama, during the 1930s. The Finch family were well respected in the town, as Atticus has acted as many of the townsfolk's lawyers before the events of the novel. For example, he acts as Walter Cunningham Sr.'s lawyer before the novel, in which he took payments of nuts, firewood, and turnip greens. The case that is the focus of the novel, and the most controversial case of Atticus' career, is Tom Robinson's, in which the man was accused of raping Mayella Ewell. His case was so controversial for one reason. A white man was the accuser, and Tom himself was African American. African American peoples were looked down upon in every aspect of Southern life. They were seen as lesser beings by everyone and everything, and yes, even by the law itself. From 1900 to 1939 was what is known as the segregation period. During this period, lynchings where African Americans were executed before they would get a fair trial were common. The legal system hardly ever punished people for doing these heinous acts against human life. An article from The Guardian states, according to EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative, of all lynchings committed after 1900, 1% resulted in a lyncher being convicted of any criminal offense. And though most of the time, if white lynchers were tried or convicted, it was for arson, rioting, or some other minor offense of any kind. This is a perfect example of how the legal system was skewed against African Americans during the time, allowing any white person to simply stroll up into a prison and kill an African American without any repercussions. This downright disgusting act was going to happen to Tom Robinson as well. Atticus knew that if Tom Robinson died from lynching, no one would be able to get prosecuted for the act. There was a very real chance Atticus could have died trying to protect a man's right to be presumed innocent. If we don't get the message to this generation how horrid the discrimination of anyone is, then we've failed as a society. Tom Robinson's trial is arguably the most important part of the novel, and what it's all being led to. In the trial, Atticus proves there is a severe amount of reasonable doubt that Tom Robinson ever committed the rape, as well as exposing Mayella's father, Bob, as being abusive towards his family. Part of his closing argument reads, "Our courts have our faults, as does any human institution, but in our country, all men are created equal." Though, through this, he uses patriotism to try to get the jury to not be biased towards Tom simply because of his skin color. Yet, although by law Atticus should have outright won this trial, due to the racist nature of the jury members, they were not swayed by his words and found him guilty. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've given us all this information, and what happened years ago? What does it matter now? I need you to think back to the Black Lives Matter movement last year. A police officer, someone who is supposed to uphold the law, very nearly got away with murdering an African American in broad daylight. Does that sound familiar to anything I've brought up so far? If we're not educated on how insanely bigoted the legal system was before our time, then we will fall back to that dark past. If we let ourselves get this corrupt again, then it's fair to say that we've failed as a society. In conclusion, To Kill a Mockingbird is a very important novel to this day and age, and is a lesson to everyone. It shows us how disgusting the legal system was in the past, and teaches us to avoid letting the same events happen again. I implore you all, really study the meaning of the book, and try to learn it. If you don't want to do that, then at least, please, treat everyone as equals, no matter their gender, race, sexuality, or any other traits that they have. They are people, and all people have a right to be treated fairly.